Hey everyone, it's Tim from Rural Pumps. In this video I'm going to show you how to change the bearings in the electric motor of a pressure pump. This is one of the main repairs that needs to be done on a pump, as the bearings are a part that wears out and needs to be occasionally replaced. Now that you're ready to start, there are some things you need to be aware of for safety when working on a pressure pump. Firstly, we are dealing with water and electricity, so make sure the power supply of the pump is turned off before working on the pump. Second, a pressure pump means that pipework can contain a lot of water pressure, even if it's stopped. We want to release that pressure safely before we disconnect any pipework. Also, if the pump is connected to a water tank, then make sure you turn off the valve on the tank so you don't risk losing your water when the pump is disconnected. Lastly, if you get stuck and aren't confident with what you are doing at any point, just stop and get a qualified repairer to finish the job. You are better off paying a few dollars for the job to be done correctly rather than breaking things and it costing more in parts, or worse, breaking the pump permanently and having to buy a new pump. The pump we are using is a Davey XJ70T. I've already removed the pump housing and diffuser cover, as we aren't discussing those parts of the pump in this video. So, step one is to remove the fan cover and the fan. We start by undoing the small screw that locks it onto the wiring cover. We can then knock the fan cover off with a light tap from a hammer. Now the fan is exposed, we discover that the pump shaft is completely seized, so I take the opportunity to unscrew the impeller off the pump end of the motor shaft. We then sit the pump on its housing, and with the fan upright, use two large flat blade screwdrivers to pry the fan off the end of the shaft. It's only held on there as a press-on fit, but if the pump has been in the weather, it can sometimes be a bit rusted and tricky to remove. Patience is the key here if you want to reuse the fan. While the motor is still sitting on its housing, we then use a socket wrench to undo the 3 bolts that attach the pump housing to the motor. Unlike some pump models, the XJ series has an air gap in between the motor and the pump, so if the mechanical seal leaks, the water can drain away and the inside of the motor stays dry. Now I'm having a bit of trouble getting into the 3rd bolt on this housing, so I changed to a ratchet spanner and it comes undone fairly easily. Once these bolts are undone, it's just a matter of laying the motor back down on its side and gently applying some pressure, and the pump housing comes away. Once detached, just check the back of the housing and the metal back plate of the motor to make sure there's no damage or bad corrosion. I'm wiping away any debris so that it all goes back together again nice and clean. Now we are going to knock the rotary assembly out of the motor. So I sit it up on some nice soft wood blocks so the pump shaft has clearance and doesn't get damaged. With a soft hammer I give it a couple of firm taps from the fan end, and you should feel the motor plate and the shaft come out as one piece. Once we tip the motor back on its side, then the shaft assembly and the plate should just pull out as one piece. Be careful, there is a wavy spring washer that sits behind the fan end bearing. This will just fall out, so make sure it isn't damaged and that you don't lose it for later. Now, as this motor has been in water, there is a lot of corrosion. If a pump gets into water like this, remember to turn off the power so you don't short out the windings, and then get the motor apart as soon as possible and get it near some warmth so it can dry out before you try and run it again. This wasn't so lucky, and I don't hold out much hope the motor will work again once we reassemble it, but it's a good demonstration of damaged bearings. So I take a wire brush and as much as possible try and clean up the rust and other debris that is inside the stationary part of the motor and on the rotor surface. I also clean up where the back plate presses back into the housing so that the bearings will align correctly when we reassemble the pump. Now it's time to head outside to my old bearing press to remove the old seized bearings off the motor shaft. So first job is to separate the back plate from the motor shaft. With these Davey motors, these back plates can be a bit delicate, so as you can see I have it well supported in the press. If you don't do this, you can risk bending or cracking the back plate or bending the motor shaft, so be gentle. I'm using a bearing press here because I have one, but also because of the corrosion that is holding everything together. Now the back plate has been removed, we check that it's not damaged and it seems okay. So now we start by pressing off the fan end bearing. I have made up some little jaw jigs out of some scrap steel to support the bearing, and we press the shaft through the bearing and catch the shaft as it drops out. Doing it like this means the bearing comes off the shaft smoothly and doesn't fall apart, even if it's badly damaged. Next, we just turn the shaft around and do the same thing to the pump end bearing. You have to be a lot more careful with this end as it's thinner and can be damaged. You also don't want to damage the thread on the end of the shaft, as this is used to attach the impeller later on. But this bearing also comes off fairly smoothly, and I catch the shaft as it drops through. Now we are back in the workshop. I unwrap the two bearings from their packets and check they are in good condition. Also, I will check the bearing seats on the shaft and make sure they are clean and not damaged. For those of you who haven't seen a bearing before, this is one of the old bearings out of the pump. This one is in okay condition, but we always replace both bearings when you repair a pump. What I'm showing here is the standard model number of these bearings. This motor has two 6203-2RS bearings. These have rubber sealed sidewalls and are lubricated for life. The rubber keeps out the dust and moisture and keeps the oil in, so the bearings have a good working life. This is what the packet looks like for the SKF 6203 bearings we sell at Rural Pumps. SKF are the original and the best Swedish quality parts. So we have thrown out the old removed bearings, and all we have to do is just loosely fit the new bearings onto the shaft. They shouldn't go on all the way, but we just push them on a bit and take the shaft back to the bearing press to fit them properly. Back out at the press, we push on first the pump end bearing and then the fan end. We are careful to only press enough so that the bearing slips down onto its seat area. Don't push any harder, especially with a big press, as you can easily bend the motor shaft. Once the shaft has even a little bend in it, then it's difficult to re-straighten and you pretty much need to buy a whole new pump. Finished now out at the press. We didn't use the press for pushing on the back plate, as this will risk damaging it. First, I give a clean up to the wavy spring washer and then drop that back down in the motor housing, ready for the refurbished shaft. Next, I use two wood blocks to give support and a soft plastic hammer, and I gently tap the shaft back onto the motor back plate, checking as I go so I know it's on straight and complete. Now it's just a matter of making sure the plastic seal surround and drain spout is sitting on the top edge of the motor. This makes sure no water and dust can get into the motor past the back plate. Then just gently dropping the motor shaft back into the housing and guiding the fan end bearing back into its seat. All it takes is a bit of a press and a couple of gentle taps with a soft hammer, and it sits back in place correctly. The only thing left to do for this job now is to reinstall the fan and its housing. We simply place the motor back on some blocks and then just press the fan on. It shouldn't need much, as it's just a press fit. Then place it back on its base and tap back on the fan cover and foot and replace the fixing screw. Give the motor a spin to test that the bearings spin freely, and the job is done. We didn't end up reassembling the pump end in this video or doing a wet test, as you can see that in one of my other videos on how to replace a mechanical seal. So thanks for watching. For more information on how pumps work or how to fix them, please visit us at ruralpumps.com.au. We have a massive range of mechanical seals, bearings, capacitors, and other parts available from our web shop to repair your pump yourself. There are links below in the description for the parts I used, plus our website, so feel free to contact us if you have any questions.